Welcome everybody, it's Phil Smith from Snoworks Ski Courses here. It's been raining down here in the valley, but I decided to come out. But the good news is, hopefully it is snowing up on the top. We've got some good news. We're hearing good things about the glacier opening up for around about the 20th of June up in Teen. Other glaciers we're hoping are going to open up. We've had some news about Hintertux, Kaunertal in Austria, so it looks like we're going to get skiing. Now we're just waiting for the government go ahead. We're waiting for those borders to hopefully open up so people can start to travel. There's going to be a lot of restrictions, but hopefully we're going to be back skiing soon. Anyway, welcome to the Snoworks webinar. I've lost count how many webinars we've done. This might be 6 or 7. We've been through a lot, and as everybody knows, we've not been able to ski, but we've been able to talk about it, and that's the important thing. So when that snow comes and we're up on the snow, hopefully there will be a lot in there that we can put to use. So what have we covered so far? We covered ski open, we covered snow displacement, we've covered focus, we've covered, I've forgotten. I'll have to go onto the website to find out. The last one, which proved to be quite popular, which was judged versus measured performance. That was quite interesting. So what I thought I'd do with this webinar is just talk about move. That may seem quite simple, but it's not. Okay, it's not. The ability to move on your skis sounds quite simple, but there's a lot of issues at stake here. So where should I start? This is a big area, and it's one of my favorite topics, along with all the other ones that we've managed to talk about. So I suppose it should start from teaching our first people on a pair of skis. And it always amazes me that I watch people come for that first lesson, yes, and I still do give first lessons every now and then, which is fantastic. I absolutely love it. I look at those people, those skiers that rock up for their first lesson, and they're all athletic. They're quite free, they even jog up, they've got their skis over their shoulder, they walk up and they put their skis on the ground, and then they go clip, clip and freeze. That's not the video that's frozen, that was me. Absolutely freeze. And then they start about learning to ski with as little movement as possible. And in some cases, if ski teaching can actually encourage that to move not very much. Hopefully some ski teaching encourages us to move a lot. So why is that? Why is it that everybody can move quite freely as we walk around, run upstairs, go onto the football pitch, play table tennis, play badminton, jump on a trampoline, but then we put on a pair of skis and so many people stop moving, literally stop moving. So now we have to remember back to what it was like when we were a child. Nobody taught us to walk. You know, as soon as our children, I have 3 children, as soon as my children begun walking, I didn't suddenly get the telephone directory out and ring up the local walking instructor to see if we could get walking lessons. No, the children learned to walk, and they learned to walk by trial and error. A lot of falling over, a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes, and that is learning. Trial and error, making mistakes, recovering. But as adults, as we get older and older, we like to try to cut out that bit. It's lovely, isn't it? To cut out all those mistakes, not wanting to have to make a mistake. So we try to get to the end point before we go through the process of learning. Okay, what is it I have to do so I don't have to learn? Just tell me what it is I need to do so I can cut out all that learning stuff. Okay, now all the mistakes, all those mistakes is where we actually learn. That's where all the learning comes from. And we've got lots of stuff on our website about making mistakes. But as an adult, it is scary. Believe you me, I'm taking up some new sports now. I actually went out last summer and I thought I'm gonna do it. I learned to ride a unicycle. Now, if you wanna really get back into learning, go and grab yourself a unicycle. I googled it to see how long it would take, and I came across a video with some guy that learned to do it in 45 minutes, learned to unicycle in 45 minutes. One of my sons did it in 30 minutes, competently. I was on to about 3 weeks, I think. But if you want to go back to what it was like to learn as a child, grab a unicycle and learn how to ride. It is an eye-opener. To begin with, you think, there's no way I'm gonna be able to ride a unicycle. You try to sit on it, it's impossible. Believe you me, it is, in the beginning, it's absolutely impossible. But gradually, just by trial and error, 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 mistake after mistake after mistake, get up, fall off, get up, fall off, get up, fall off, get up, fall off, get up, it starts to come together. And eventually, somehow, our subconscious starts to pick up things, and before you know it, you're going 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, 30 meters, and you've learned to ride a unicycle. It's the best thing to remember what it's like to learn as a child. However, if you're gonna do it, make sure you get padded up quite nicely. There are a lot of tumbles coming your way. Anyway, I'm here to talk about skiing and moving in skiing. Now, there is a gentleman, a scholar called David Kolb. That's it, David Kolb, who talks about learning a lot. So Google him. He came up with a model which is called the Experiential Learning Cycle, ELC. David Kolb's ELC. It's a lovely model, and it talks about how to learn through experience. Now, believe it or not, all learning in motor skills is through experiential learning. We like to think we're going to cut to the chase and get some kind of shortcut, but there is no shortcut. There is no shortcut. You have to go through the experiential learning cycle, and that's getting in there and having a go, making mistakes, recovering from your mistakes, learning by mistakes. But isn't that just life in general? Isn't that life? Quite often as we get older, we become afraid to move, not just in movement, but afraid to move in life. We go for the safe option. We want to know what's going to happen before we actually commit ourselves to it. And that's the same in skiing. We try to shortcut the learning, grab a lesson, and try to find out what it is we need to do before we actually go through the process of learning to do it. So our movements get less and less and less, which I'm going to come back to. But to begin with, I'm going to have to talk, okay, you probably guessed that, I'm going to have to talk about what kind of sport skiing is, so that we can then look at the movements that are required for skiing. Now, everybody that listens to us, everybody that comes in our courses, everybody that goes onto our websites knows that we talk about skiing being an open sport. Open, where the environment is constantly changing. The snow texture is changing, the terrain is changing, the weather is changing. Every time you put those skis on and go skiing, it's going to be different. Okay, it's going to be different. So therefore, we have to learn movements for an open sport. Now, in our teaching, we often give the comparison between two different sports that take place on the same surface with similar equipment, but yet are completely different. Both are skillful, but are very different. One is figure skating, and the other is ice hockey. Okay. Now, figure skating is a closed sport. Don't get me wrong, it is an incredibly skillful sport, but it's closed. Okay. Nothing is interfering with the figure skater unless you're doing pairs, doubles, and then you've got a partner to work with. But still, they generally know what each other is going to do. Whereas ice hockey, oh my word, you can't get any more open than ice hockey. Okay, it's changing all the time. So quite often we ask our guests, what do they think skiing is? Is it more akin to figure skating, or is it more akin to ice hockey? Now, this is absolutely key, because it will determine, one, how you think about skiing, and two, how you're going to have to learn skiing. If it's more akin to figure skating, then the movements are much more closed. They're much more controlled. You know what you're going to do before you do it. But if it's more like ice hockey, then the environment is going to be changing all the time. You don't know what you're going to do before you're going to do. You have a rough idea, but it's trial and error. Okay, there's a lot of adjustments. Your mind is working at the same time that you're skiing. You're making the adjustments as you're skiing. So the movement patterns have to be much freer, they have to be much more random, and you have to pull on those movement patterns at a moment's notice. In which case you need a very, very large toolbox of movements, which I'm going to come on to. Now, if you think it's more akin to figure skating, it may be in some cases, and we know there are people that prefer that, skiing on well-groomed terrain, working with specific techniques. But going into bumps, going on into off-piste, skiing ice, skiing in bad visibility, skiing when it's snowing, that's incredibly open. So you're gonna have to change how you think. If you have a closed mentality, at some point, if you want to ski the whole mountain, you're gonna have to go open. You got to go open. You don't have a choice, I'm afraid. You got to be an open skier. Okay. So I want to talk, just go on to something else for a little bit and talk about the history of ski teaching and why some people may be limiting their movements rather than encouraging more versatility in their movements. Now, a long time ago, when skiing first started off, it was very simple. It was just a means of traveling from A to B. There were no lessons. You put on a pair of skis, stumbled around, tried to learn out how to ski just to get to school or deliver post or get to see a friend or whatever. It's a form of transportation. And then gradually ski schools started to sprout up. But before that, it also became, that form of transportation also became a sport. People started to race. So we had these two different journeys. One was ski teaching, okay, where people were taught how to learn to ski, and the other was ski racing. Now, I don't know if you know this, I'm sure many of you do, but they took different routes. Ski racing took a different route to ski teaching. This is going back in time. Now, ski teaching became what we used to term maneuver-based. People would learn maneuvers, and those maneuvers were given names. And it started off right at the beginning, snowplow, and then snowplow turn, then traverse, side slip, swing to the hill, stem Christie in some countries, plough parallel turn in other countries, then onto the parallel turn, which everybody knows about, and then other manoeuvres which were given names: stem turns, step turns, jump turns, short radius turns, long radius turns. They were all given names. Now, ski racing, manoeuvres didn't exist, and they never have done. They've never existed. It's been much more skills based. For example, let's take the parallel turn. Everybody knows about the parallel turn. If you grab a book, a manual from the ski teaching associations, more or less every ski teaching association in the world, you will have described the parallel turn. It will be described. Okay? If you pick up a book or a manual from ski racing, it doesn't even mention it. It doesn't even mention it. Now, what's going on here? How come ski racers are learning differently to people coming on holiday? Okay, so beware. Now, we recognized that ski teaching was very what we called maneuver based. People were learning maneuvers. So then they were struggling to make the breakthrough into advanced and expert skiing. So many years ago in my history, along with some of my colleagues, and I was lucky enough that I was in a position to be able to do that, we tried to influence our own association, which is the British Association of Snow Sports Instructors. At the time, it was maneuver based, and we took all the maneuvers and we thought, why are we doing these maneuvers? Why would you do parallel turn, for example? Now, let's take that parallel turn. We had two types of parallel turn, and I was assessed doing this. We had what we call a basic parallel turn and what we called an end form parallel turn. Some of you will remember this. A basic parallel turn was done with the legs apart, and an end form parallel turn was done with the legs together. That was it. And we went through all these maneuvers: step turns, short swings, short radius turns, compression turns, there's one for you, jump turns. I've mentioned the early one, snowplow turn. And we changed them all to a system which surrounded skiing the environment. So we changed all the step turns and we put in variable conditions, just slush and deep snow and heavy snow and crud and stuff like that. We took the maneuver which is called a compression turn and we put in bumps, just skiing bumps. We took in what we called the end form parallel turn, which is a more sort of refined way of skiing, and put in higher speed skiing. So we had higher speed skiing, we had bumps, we had skiing variable conditions and off-piste. Oh, and the last one, we took out all the jump turns that we had to demonstrate in our ski instructor exams and replaced it with skiing steep terrain. So we took what was a maneuver-based system and changed it to a skills-based system. Okay, now that was a huge, huge step in ski teaching, moving from maneuver-based to skills-based. A maneuver is a set movement pattern, okay? And if you are taught a maneuver, then your movements are they're getting less because you're trying to get the maneuver correct. So your movements become less and less and less and less, a sort of converging way of skiing. So you end up with a particular maneuver, but you don't move very much. If you take a skills-based learning approach, then the movements are divergent. The movements that you learn are never ending. Say, for example, running through a crowded bar carrying a tray of drinks. Now that's a skill-based skill. You know, to actually move through a crowded bar carrying a tray of drinks is pretty skillful. It's a skills-based task and it's never the same twice. Every time you walk through that crowded bar carrying a tray of carrying a tray of drinks, it's a new experience. It is never repeated. It can never be repeated twice. And that's what movements are like in skiing. Okay? If you truly take a skills-based approach to skiing, your movements will never be the same. Every time you go out skiing, you will have a different set of movement patterns. Not the same set of movements. They will be different. The snow's different. The visibility is different. The terrain is different. The angle of the snow is different. The camber of the snow is different. There's more people on the slope. The task is different. Okay, so a skills-based approach to skiing is infinitely variable, which is an amazing experience. I'll come on to the types of movements in a minute. But just to finish off that story, myself and some of my colleagues, John Arnold, here we go, John Arnold, Fred Foxon, Hugh Money, who else have we got? Peter Cavell, I think that was it. Peter Cavell, Fred Foxon, Hugh Money, John Arnold, I'm sure there was more, I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned myself. We got together and we thought, how can we change things? So one was moving it, the association from maneuver-based to skills-based. Okay, so we tried to take out all maneuvers, but things were still given names. Now this is absolutely key, and people will think I am mad here. We tried to add an ing onto the end of everything. So plough turn became ploughing or plough turning. Traverse became traversing. Everything had an ing added on the end. Balancing, sliding, slipping, skiing. So we took everything and turned it into a verb. Okay, into a verb rather than a noun. Rather than a name of something which people would try to reciprocate, we turned everything into a verb. So you'd learn slipping, you'd learn ploughing rather than the snowplow turn. Okay, traversing rather than the traverse. Okay, if you wanted to learn the parallel turn, it was changed to parallel turning rather than the parallel turn. Now it may seem semantics, but it's not. It's not semantics. It's absolutely key that we changed everything to doing activities. Everything became a verb. Now if you want a greater insight into this, have a look on our blog. One of my favourite blogs I've ever written, which is called Live or Skiing in the Land of Ing. It's a wonderful little story about living and skiing in the land of Ing. Okay, and then you will get a good idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so skills based. So now movements. Obviously we have to learn movements, and most movements people have got anyway, just by everyday use. Walking, running, climbing, skipping, playing tennis. So our movement patterns are massively varied. We've got all the movements necessary to ski really well. We've just got to get used to skiing. So it's a journey that we're going to have to take. Another colleague of mine, in fact, one of the people that I work with, Lee Townend, who might be listening in on this, so welcome Lee. We got together once and we thought, okay, well let's try to get some framework about movements for people to work with, so they've got some framework. So if they're going out and they're going to work on developing a particular move pattern, they can see where it fits in. And we developed what we called the movement matrix. The movement matrix. We took every joint, well, we took the main joints, but it can be expanded to every joint in your whole body. We took every movement and we worked out a matrix so that we can encourage people to make every movement possible around every joint. Now, to give you a little bit more of an understanding of that, the three main joints, and everybody knows these, are ankles, knees and hips. Obviously we've got all our other joints, neck joints, all the joints down the spine, elbow joints, shoulder joints, whatever, toe joints, fingers joints. We've got hundreds of joints, but the three main joints are the ankles, knees and hips. We've then got three different types of movements that can be categorized into movements. So we've got flexion and extension movements. Okay, so here's just a simple one. Okay, a flexion and extension movement of the elbow. Okay, flexion extension movements of the leg. Okay, flexion, I can't show you, but flexion extension movements of the ankle joints, flexion extension movements of the knee joints. So we got flexion extension movements. So we have to have flexion extension movements in skiing. Then we've got what we call rotary movements. So some joints are very good at this. Take my shoulder joint, for example. Okay, I have it's a ball and socket joint, so it's very, very good at doing rotary movements. So we've got joints that allow us to do rotary movements. The hip joint is another joint. We've got lots of rotation, hopefully, in our hip joints. But if you haven't, it's something that you're going to have to learn. Okay, so rotary movements. We've got rotary movements around other joints as well. So we've got flexion extension movements. We've got rotary movements, and then the third category of movements are lateral movements. Well, some people term adduction and abduction, but lateral movements, moving sideways, if you like to keep it simple. So we got sideways movements, we've got lateral movements, we've got lateral movements with the ankles, we've got lateral movements with the knees, we've got lateral movements, be careful with that one. That's another blog. We've got lateral movements with the hips. We've got lateral movements with the whole body. Okay, so there's lots of movements. We've got lateral movements. We've got flexion extension movements. We've got rotary movements. Now, skiers often are biased to one of those movements. And if you're biased towards one of those movements, it comes as no surprise that that is the sort of skiing that you would prefer to do. To give you an example, if you are biased towards rotary movements, then you have no problem skiing steep terrain. You love bumps, and believe it or not, you enjoy skiing ice. But what you don't like doing is skiing fast. Don't try skiing fast with a big emphasis on rotary movements. It's not much fun, believe you me, and very scary. Okay, if you have a big emphasis and you prefer lateral movements, okay, then you're working mostly with your edges, which means you love skiing fast. It's completely the opposite. You love to ski fast, but moguls, oh my God, don't even go near a mogul field. Steep terrain, difficult, okay. Narrow paths, gullies, tricky. But speed, yes, you like to ski speed. And then if you have an emphasis on flexion extension movements, which control pressure and more of a pushing action, then That's a sort of a jack of all trades and master of none. You'd be quite happy at getting stuck into off-piste, but not skiing too fast and not skiing slow. Bumps might be a little bit tricky, but if they're spread out, it will be okay. So it's the jack of all trades, master of none. Now, if I take the classic parallel turn, which many of us learnt in ski school, going back in years, then I'd say that that probably had an equal balance between the three. A third edging, a third rotary or twisting, and a third pushing. So it was the jack of all trades, master of none. So it would take us so far. But to go further, okay, we've got to change that. We've got to change how we think about movement. Our movements or our skills need to be more like a graphic equalizer. A graphic equalizer that we can turn up and turn down. So if I want to ski at high speed, my lateral movements go up. Okay, if I want to ski slow speed, the lateral movements come down and the rotary movements go up. If I'm going into deep, heavy snow, which I need to push, then the flexion extension movements come up, so I can push the snow out the way. And you see, so our movements are like a graphic equalizer, always changing. Now, where are we? So that's the movement matrix. So what we're trying to do there is develop every movement around every joint, but it doesn't stop there. Okay, each one of those movements, rotary movements, flexion extension movements, lateral movements, around each of the joints, ankles, knees, hips, and every joint in the body. Some are better at some movements than others, but every joint in the body, each one of those movements is infinitely variable. Infinitely variable. Okay, it's not like you learn a movement and that's it. It's infinitely variable. So what are the variations? What are the variations in one particular movement? Okay, let's take flexion extension. Let's just take my arm, for example. Or in skiing terms, it would be my leg. Extension, flexion, extension, flexion. What are the variables? Well, first of all, we have the speed of the movement. That's infinitely variable. Take my arm again, so I've got slow movements to fast movements and everything in between. Okay, slow movements to fast movements, infinitely variable. Okay, which is great news because it means the journey is never ending. So every time you go out skiing, you've got more stuff to learn. Okay? So the speed of the movement is infinitely variable. Then what else do we have? We have the range of the movement. The range, small to large. Okay, so I have small movements. Take my arm again, flexion, extension, small movements to large movements. We have the same with the legs. A small movement to a large movement. Now we have to develop all of those. The whole range of movements, not just a little bit. Sometimes we have skiers that develop large movements, but not the tinsy-wincy tiny little movements that give us the feel, the touch, the finesse when we're skiing. Those tiny movements. Okay? We've got to develop everything. Big movements, medium movements, small movements. We've got to develop the speed of the movements. Quick movements or slow movements. And then we've got two legs. So we've got legs that can do things differently. Okay, so we've got the speed of the movements and the range of the movements. Try to remember that. Each one infinitely variable. So this gives us a huge toolbox. So, and if I go out and I develop all those movements, all those range of movements, all those speed of movements, round every joint, guess what? I'm going to be able to tackle everything. But that still doesn't tell you how to ski. Okay, that still doesn't tell you how to ski. Okay, I might be able to move like some kind of madman, but can I ski? How do you actually ski? Now, this is very clever. Okay, you need to have a goal. Okay, you need to have a task. And that is what links everything together, the task. What is the task? So it may be taking a particular line down the bumps. And if you've got all the rotary movements and the flexion extension movements available to you, and you select a line which is just within your ability level or just to the edge of your ability level, the brain will pick up all those movements and you'll be able to go down there. You'll be able to go down the bumps. Okay, the brain will work out how to coordinate the movements. Now, I'm going to mention, I've already mentioned this chap once. When he told me this, something just went click. It was another one of those moments that change how we think about things. And it's Fred Foxon. If you're watching Fred, I owe you for this one. I've used it thousands of times. Take a signature as an example. Now, I, luckily, have all the movements available to me in my fingers, my wrists, my elbows and my shoulder. I have the range of movement and I have the speed of movement. I have everything available to me, which means when I pick up a pen and write my signature, it's pretty complex this, I might not be able to show you here. When I write my signature, just nice and slow using my fingers, okay, the brain coordinates it beautifully. And that's just using my fingers. I can speed it up, speed the movements up, and there's my signature speeded up. Now, here's the clever bit. I can freeze my fingers and use my elbow and shoulders, and I can make the signature 10 times to 20 times the size, and it's clearly my signature. It's clearly my signature. Anybody can make it out. Phil Smith, done with my elbow and my shoulder, 10 to 20 times the size. And it's a very similar signature. Not exact, but close enough. Now get this. Okay. If I grab a post, a 2-meter long post, put a paintbrush on the end of it and go up to a wall, stick the paintbrush in the pot of paint and then write my signature walking along at the same time using my legs, my shoulders, my arms, and write my signature 300 times the size of the signature you've just seen on the piece of paper, it will be my signature. Walking sideways with a big stick with a paintbrush stuck on the end. If I put that paintbrush on the end of my foot, strap it to the end of my foot, I can make my signature with my foot. Put it on my elbow, I can write my signature with my elbow. Put the paintbrush in my mouth and I can write the signature with my mouth. Now that is absolutely amazing, which means if you have the movements available to you, if you have a goal, you know what your task is, the brain can coordinate the movements to achieve the task. And that is how it links together. Now, I don't want to go on much longer than that. That's 33 minutes. So you've got to move on skis. You've got to move. Have a look at David Kolb's experiential learning cycle. Get in there, give it a go and learning how to move. Now, an interesting thing about movement, adults, because we try to bypass the learning, we often want to know what to do before we do it, so we get rid of all that learning stuff, get it out the way. Don't want to fall over, don't want to lose control, don't want to lose balance, just want to know how to be able to ski without all the learning stuff going on. When a child loses their balance, they have never skied down to me and said, "What did I do wrong?" Never. Okay, because losing balance and recovering balance is part of the learning process, and every single child knows that. They know that naturally. That's how they learn. But as an adult, when they lose balance, believe you me, they get down to the instructor and say, "What did I do wrong?" Now, of course, you did nothing wrong. Losing balance is part of the learning process. And if you want to get good at balancing, what do you have to do? You have to lose balance. You can't get good at balancing with not being out of balance. You have to be out of balance to get good at balancing. Ah, the ing at the end, balancing. Okay, so remember that. So mistakes, errors, Okay, it's all part of the learning process. I know nobody likes to fall over. I don't like to fall over. It hurts now. When I was younger, it didn't hurt. Okay, but we still need that learning process. We still need that learning process. So, David Kolb, experiential learning cycle. Have a look at it. Absolutely fantastic. Then we've got to learn to move. We've got to learn to move. Okay, gradually we learn more and more and more. So we need what we call a divergent way of learning. More movement, more movement, more movement, more movement, more movement. Not less and less and less and less. Aiming for the correct way of skiing. Now this is where often goes wrong in ski teaching, where people are learning to ski correctly. So they're going convergent to a particular point, and then all they have at the end is this one method of skiing. It's not going to get you very far. What you end up doing is looking for terrain that suits the way that we ski. If you have a particular way of skiing, you will look for snow texture and terrain that suits your skiing. You want to go the opposite way. You want to adjust your skiing to the mountain rather than trying to find places on the mountain that suit the way that you ski. So you've got to go divergent. Okay, so you need movements. Just as a quick recap, 3 different types of movements: lateral, flexion, extension, rotation. Joints, ankles, knees and hips, the main ones, along with every other joint in the human body. Range of movement, the amount you can move, infinitely variable. Okay, the speed of movement, how fast you can move, infinitely variable. Now this is a journey that we can take, and it's a never-ending journey, I'm afraid. You never get to the final point, but boy is it fun going there. You've got to somehow in your skiing develop enough movements to cater for every different type of terrain that you're going into. Okay? Move away from maneuver-based skiing into what we call skills-based learning, where the skills are infinitely variable. And if after all that you don't know how to ski, what is your task? That is the key. That links the movements to the task. Okay, whatever it is, whether it's a short turn, a long turn, slowing down, speeding up, going faster, taking a particular line through the moguls, the task is everything. Remember the signature. If you know what the task is, the brain can pull out the movements that you have available to you and can use them to achieve the task. Right, I'm going to finish there. Now I'm going to put this up later on. I videoed it, so I'm going to post it up with loads of other skiing and diagrams and everything. So, key, learn to move. Hope you enjoyed it. Catch you next time. Thanks for listening.